The stars had never looked so cold. High Commander stood at the viewing window of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and watched the blue planet grow larger with each passing hour. Earth. Such a small world. Such a weak civilization. This conquest would bring him great honor in the eyes of the Emperor. Behind him, the bridge hummed with activity. Hundreds of officers worked at their stations, monitoring the fleet's approach. 3,000 warships followed the Eternal Dominion through the darkness of space. It was the largest invasion force the Empire had ever assembled. Each vessel was massive, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. Each carried thousands of ground troops ready to claim this world for the Empire. His reptilian skin reflected the starlight as he turned to face his second-in-command. Admiral approached with a data tablet in his clawed hands. His scales were a darker shade of, marking him as a member of the warrior caste. "High Commander," said, bowing his head slightly, "we have intercepted their communications. The humans have detected our approach." Thin lips curled into what passed for a smile among his species. "And what is their response?" "Panic, High Commander. Their leaders are calling emergency meetings. Their primitive military forces are scrambling." Paused, and something like amusement crossed his features. "They are trying to decide whether to fight or surrender." "It will not matter which they choose," clasped his hands behind his back. "We have conquered over 200 worlds across 5 galaxies. We have crushed civilizations far more advanced than these humans. They still burn fossil fuels. They still fight among themselves over patches of dirt. They are nothing." Nodded in agreement. The scouts reported that their space capability is extremely limited. They have a few satellites and a small station in orbit, nothing that poses any threat to our forces. "Then we shall make quick work of them." Walked back to his command chair and sat down. The chair was carved from the bones of a great beast from his, a symbol of his status. "Give the order. All ships advance to bombardment positions. We will be in range within 6 hours." The order went out across the fleet. 3,000 ships began their final approach toward Earth. Their engines burned bright against the black void, a wall of death moving toward an unsuspecting world. On Earth, the situation was very different from what they imagined. In Geneva, Switzerland, the United Nations Emergency Council had gathered in a bunker deep beneath the city. World leaders appeared on screens around the room, their faces tense. The American president sat at the head of the table, listening as reports came in from around the globe. Satellites had captured images of the approaching fleet. The numbers were terrifying. 3,000 ships, said the Russian representative, his voice heavy with dread. "Each one larger than anything we have ever built. Our nuclear weapons would be like throwing stones at them." Murmurs of fear rippled through the room. Some leaders looked ready to weep. Others had gone pale with shock. The end of human civilization seemed to be approaching at the speed of light. Then a side door opened, and General Jack walked in. Jack was 62 years old, with hair cut short and a face lined by decades of service. He wore a simple military uniform with no medals or decorations. His eyes were calm, almost peaceful, as he surveyed the panicked room. "General," the president said, relief evident in her voice, "please tell us you have something." Jack walked to the center of the room and stood before the main screen, which showed the approaching alien fleet. He studied the image for a moment, counting the ships, measuring their formation. Then he turned to face the assembled leaders of Earth. "Ladies and," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room, "what you see on that screen is the largest invasion force the Empire has ever assembled. By their standards, this is overkill. They sent enough ships to conquer a dozen worlds, all aimed at our single planet." "Then we are finished," said the British Prime Minister, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack smiled. It was a small smile, gentle almost, the kind a grandfather might give to a frightened child. "No, ma'am, we are not finished. We have not even begun." He pressed a button on his tablet and the screen changed. Instead of the alien fleet, it now showed something else. Something that made every person in the room gasp. Orbital platforms surrounded Earth like invisible guardians. Satellites that had been disguised as simple communication relays revealed their true nature. Weapons platforms hidden in asteroids powered up for the first time. A network of defense systems that spanned the entire solar system came alive on the screen. For 60 years, Jack said, we have known this day was coming. Since 1947, when we recovered a crashed scout ship in New Mexico, we have been preparing. Every nation on Earth has contributed. Every breakthrough in physics and engineering has been applied. We have built weapons that the cannot imagine. The Chinese representative leaned forward, his eyes wide. You kept this secret from us. No, sir. Your government knew. Every government represented in this room knew. We all agreed that the secret must be kept from the public to prevent panic. We agreed that we would work together in the shadows while pretending to fight on the surface. Jack looked around the room. Today, that pretense ends. He pressed another button. Around the world, military commanders received encrypted messages. Submarines surfaced and aimed hidden missiles at the sky. Underground bases opened their doors for the first time in decades. A sleeping giant was waking up. They think we are primitive, Jack said. They think we are helpless. They think they are coming to harvest another weak civilization. He turned back to the screen, watching the enemy fleet approach. They are wrong. They are about to discover what happens when you threaten the people of Earth. In the silence that followed, hope began to replace fear on the faces of the world's leaders. For the first time since the alien fleet had been detected, they allowed themselves to believe that survival might be possible. Far above the Earth, in a hidden station orbiting the moon, a young man named Danny Harper sat at his command console. He was 28 years old, with dark hair and his father's steady hands. Before him, screens showed every ship in the fleet. Each one had a targeting solution locked onto it. His communications officer, Lieutenant Emma Grant, looked at him with nervous eyes. Commander, they're getting closer. 6 hours until they reach bombardment range. Danny nodded slowly. His finger rested near a button that would send a signal to every defense platform in the system. One press, and humanity would reveal its true strength to the galaxy. Let them come, he said quietly. Let them get nice and close. I want them to see Earth clearly. I want it to be the last thing they ever see. The waiting had begun, and soon the universe would learn that humanity was not prey. It was something far more dangerous. The year was 1947 when everything changed. A young intelligence officer named Jack, only 22 years old at the time, stood in a New Mexico desert and watched soldiers pull a strange craft from the sand. The ship was small, barely larger than a truck, but its design was like nothing on Earth. The metal was smooth and silver, with no visible seams or joints. It seemed to glow faintly in the morning sun. Inside the ship, they found a pilot. The creature was reptilian with scales and large black eyes. It was dying. Green blood pooled beneath its broken body, and its breath came in short, painful gasps. Jack was the only one who thought to try communicating with it. While the other soldiers stood back in fear, he knelt beside the dying alien and showed it a pen and paper. The creature understood. With trembling claws, it drew pictures. A large fleet of ships, a blue planet being consumed by fire, and finally, a symbol that Jack would later learn meant empire. The alien died before sunrise, but its message was clear. Something was coming for Earth. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. And when it came, it would come with overwhelming force. That single night changed the course of human history. Within a month, the major powers of Earth were brought together in secret. The Americans, the Soviets, the British, the Chinese, and many others put aside their differences behind closed doors. They formed a hidden alliance with one purpose: to prepare for the invasion that would someday arrive. On the surface, they continued to fight and argue as they always had. In the shadows, they worked as one. Decades passed, the Cold War came and went. Nations rose and fell, but the secret work never stopped. Jack rose through the ranks, eventually becoming the head of the Global Defense Initiative. He married, had children, and watched his grow up in a world that had no idea how close it was to extinction. Every morning, he woke up wondering if today would be the day the aliens returned. The breakthroughs came slowly at first. Human scientists studied the crashed ship piece by piece. They learned about new forms of energy, new ways of bending space itself. By the 1980s, they had built their first prototype weapons. By the 1990s, they had begun placing satellites in orbit that looked ordinary but contained devastating power. Then came Dr. Ben Harper. Ben was a physicist who had been recruited into the program in 2001. He was brilliant, perhaps the most brilliant mind humanity had ever produced. His wife, Dr. Lisa Harper, was equally gifted, specializing in targeting systems and computer algorithms. Together, they worked in a secret laboratory on the moon, far from prying eyes. In 2019, Ben had his breakthrough. He discovered how to manipulate dimensional energy. In simple terms, he found a way to tear holes in reality itself. A beam powered by this energy would not just destroy a target. It would remove the target from existence, sending it to a dimension where matter could not survive. Lisa designed the systems that would aim these beams with perfect accuracy. From millions of kilometers away, they could target a single ship with precision down to the centimeter. Nothing could dodge them. Nothing could block them. Once locked on, a target was already dead. Their son, Danny, had grown up on the moon base. He knew nothing else but the mission. By the time he was 18, he was already training to command the orbital defense platforms. He was calm, focused, and utterly dedicated to protecting his home planet. Now, in the command center of Defense Hub Alpha, Danny watched the fleet approach. The enemy ships were still hours away, but he could see them clearly on his screens. Each one was a massive thing of black metal and glowing engines. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of deadly insects crossing the void. "How are you feeling?" Emma Grant asked him. She had been his friend since childhood, and she knew him better than anyone. Danny considered the question. "Strange," he admitted. "We've trained for this our whole lives. Our parents built these weapons. Our grandparents started the project. And now it's finally happening." "Are you scared?" "No," Danny shook his head slowly. "I'm not scared, I'm ready." In another part of the station, his father was running final checks on the weapon systems. Ben Harper was in his 60s now, his hair gone white and his face lined with age. But his mind was still sharp, and his hands were steady as he worked. Lisa sat beside him, monitoring the targeting computers. She had spent 30 years perfecting these systems. Every line of code, every algorithm, every calculation had been checked and rechecked 1,000 times. There was no room for error. When the order came, 40,000 weapons would fire simultaneously at 40,000 targets. Each beam would travel at the speed of light. Each beam would hit its target with perfect accuracy. "Do you think they know?" Lisa asked quietly. "Do you think they have any idea what's waiting for them?" Ben looked out the window at the distant stars. Somewhere out there, the fleet was drawing closer. Their commanders were probably laughing, celebrating their easy victory. They had no idea that they were flying into a trap. "No," Ben said. "They think we're primitive. They think we're helpless. That's what we wanted them to think. Every time their scouts came to observe us, we hid our true capabilities. We let them see what they expected to see. And now they'll learn the truth." Ben turned back to his work. "But by then, it will be too late." On Earth, General Jack stood in the Global Command Center, deep beneath Geneva. He had waited 40 years for this moment. He had sacrificed everything, kept the biggest secret in human history, all for this single day. Around him, screens showed the enemy fleet and the hidden defenses that would soon destroy it. Military officers from every nation worked side by side, united against a common threat. For the first time in history, humanity was truly acting as one. "General," said an aide, "the enemy fleet will be in range in 4 hours. All defense platforms report ready." Jack nodded slowly. He thought about the dying alien in the desert, the warning it had given with its final breaths. He thought about all the people who had worked in secret, never able to tell their families what they were doing. He thought about the children who would grow up in a world that would never know how close it had come to destruction. "Hold position," he said calmly. "Let them get closer. We only get one chance at this. When we strike with everything we have. No survivors, no escape. Let the entire galaxy see what happens when you come for Earth." The countdown had begun, and they had no idea that they were counting down to their own destruction. High Commander stood before the main viewing window of the Eternal Dominion and allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Earth filled the window now, a beautiful blue marble wrapped in white clouds. Soon it would burn. Soon it would belong to the Empire. "Entering bombardment range in 15 minutes, announced his tactical officer. "All ships report weapons charged and ready." Clasped his hands behind his back. Around him, his bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. They had done this many times before. The conquest of a primitive world was almost boring at this point. The outcome was never in doubt. Admiral approached with the latest sensor readings. "High Commander, their orbital stations are powering up. They appear to be communication satellites." "Let them call for help," said with amusement. "There is no one to answer. The nearest civilization capable of challenging us is 1,000 light-years away. By the time any help could arrive, this world will have been under our control for centuries." Nodded, but something in his expression caught attention. The Admiral was frowning at his data tablet, scrolling through readings that seemed to confuse him. "Something troubles you, Admiral." "The energy signatures, High Commander. Some of these satellites are producing readings that do not match their apparent function. The power output is unusual." Waved his hand dismissively. "Probably their primitive reactors malfunctioning. These humans can barely keep their own cities powered. Do not concern yourself with." He never finished the sentence. Far above the Eternal Dominion, in a station orbiting Earth's moon, Commander Danny Harper pressed a single button. His voice was calm as he spoke into his communicator. "All platforms, this is command. Execute firing solution Alpha. All targets fire." Across the solar system, 40,000 weapons activated at the same instant. The dimensional disruptors were not like any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fire missiles or plasma or any form of conventional ammunition. Instead, they tore tiny holes in the fabric of reality itself. Through these holes, they projected beams of pure dimensional energy, beams that traveled at the speed of light and could not be stopped by any known defense. From Earth's orbit, from hidden platforms in the asteroid belt, from satellites disguised as space debris, the beams lanced outward toward the fleet. Saw the first flash of light through the viewing window. It was beautiful, actually, a brilliant white-blue glow that seemed to come from everywhere at once. For a fraction of a second, he wondered what could possibly be causing such a display. Then the beam struck the Eternal Dominion. The ship did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply stopped existing. The dimensional energy tore through the vessel's hull as if it were made of paper, removing every atom from normal space. One moment the Eternal Dominion was there, the greatest warship the Empire had ever built. The next moment it was gone, had no time to scream. He had no time for a final thought. He and his entire crew were erased from existence in less than a heartbeat. Across the fleet, the same scene repeated 3,000 times over. Ships vanished in flashes of white light. The beams punched through shields as if they did not exist. Armor that could withstand nuclear blasts offered no protection. The most advanced warships in 5 galaxies were destroyed as easily as a human might swat a fly. On the bridge of the Crimson Thunder, Admiral had just enough time to see the beam approaching. His black eyes went wide with disbelief. This was impossible. This could not be happening. The humans were primitives. They could not possibly have weapons like this. The beam hit, and Admiral ceased to exist. The Thunder Guard, the pride of empire, the endless conquest, the death's shadow, ship after ship after ship, all gone. The massive invasion fleet that had filled the space around Earth was reduced to nothing in the time it takes a human heart to beat twice. In Defense Hub Alpha, Danny Harper watched his screens update in real time. 3,000 red dots, each representing an enemy ship, blinked out of existence one by one. Within 5 seconds, every single dot was gone. Emma Grant stared at the screen, her hands trembling. "Total annihilation," she whispered. "Every ship, every single one." Danny let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Confirmed kills on all targets, scanning for survivors. The scan came back empty. There was nothing left of the fleet but slowly spreading clouds of dust, tiny particles that had been knocked loose by the dimensional disturbance. Not a single piece of debris larger than a fist remained. Not a single escape pod. Not a single survivor. The greatest military force the Empire had ever assembled had been wiped out in 4.7 seconds. In the command center beneath Geneva, General Jack watched the same data feed. Around him, military officers from a dozen nations sat in stunned silence. They had known what the weapons could do. They had seen the tests. But watching it happen in real time, watching 3,000 enemy ships disappear in seconds, was something else entirely. "It worked," said the Russian general, his voice barely above a whisper. "It actually worked." Jack nodded slowly. He thought about all the years of preparation, all the sacrifices, all the secrets. He thought about the young man he had been, kneeling beside a dying alien in a New Mexico desert. That alien had warned humanity of what was coming, and humanity had listened. Now, Jack said, "We send the message." The message was broadcast on every frequency the Empire used. It was transmitted at maximum power, meant to reach not just the Empire but every civilization within 100 light years. It was simple and direct. "This is Earth. Your invasion force has been destroyed, every ship, every soldier, every weapon, all gone in less than 5 seconds. We suggest you reconsider any future hostile actions against our world. This is your only warning. There will not be a second one." The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light, and as it traveled, so did the story of what had happened. A primitive world, a supposedly easy conquest, and an armada of 3,000 warships erased from existence in the blink of an eye. On the moon base, Ben and Lisa Harper held each other as the reality of what they had done sank in. Their weapons had worked perfectly. Their targeting systems had not missed a single shot. Humanity was safe. "It's over," Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. "After all these years, it's finally over." Ben kissed her forehead and looked out at the stars. "No," he said gently. "It's not over, it's just beginning. The galaxy knows about us now. Everything changes from here." He was right. Nothing would ever be the same again. The throne room of Emperor Os fell silent. Every advisor, every general, every servant stood frozen as the message played again on the massive screen that dominated the far wall. The images showed empty space where the invasion fleet should have been. 3,000 ships gone. The mightiest force the Empire had ever assembled, erased from existence as if it had never been there at all. Emperor Os gripped the arms of his throne so tightly that his claws left marks in the ancient stone. His scales had gone pale, almost white, a sign of extreme stress in his species. For a long moment he could not speak. He could not think. He could only stare at the screen and try to understand what he was seeing. "Play it again," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. The recording played once more, the fleet approaching Earth, the strange white-blue lights appearing all around them, and then nothing, just empty space and a few clouds of dust where the most powerful warships in the galaxy had been. How? The Emperor's voice rose to a shout. How is this possible? Our scouts reported they had barely achieved space travel. They were still fighting among themselves over pieces of their own planet. They were supposed to be primitives. Intelligence Minister Ra stepped forward, her movements careful and slow. She had delivered bad news to the Emperor before. She knew how dangerous it could be. Her hands trembled as she held her data tablet. "Your Radiance," she said, bowing her head low. "We have analyzed all available data. The humans deceived us. For decades, perhaps longer, they presented a false image to the galaxy. They hid their true capabilities. They let us see what we expected to see." "A deception," General growled. He was the commander of the Imperial ground forces, a veteran of 100 conquests. "You are saying they fooled our scouts, our intelligence networks, our entire empire?" Ra nodded, her eyes still downcast. "Yes, General, that is exactly what I am saying. The weapons they use do not match any known technology in our databases. The energy signatures are unlike anything we have ever recorded. We cannot even determine how the weapons work, let alone how to defend against them." Emperor As rose from his throne, his tall form casting a long shadow across the floor. He walked toward the screen, staring at the empty space where his fleet had died. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked quietly. "Approximately 800 combat-capable vessels, Your Radiance. The invasion force represented 60% of our total military strength." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. The Empire, which had conquered over 200 worlds and ruled 5 galaxies with an iron claw, had lost more than half its military power in a single day. In less than 5 seconds, to be precise. "Then we rebuild," General said. "We gather what forces we have, we build new ships, and we return to that miserable little planet and burn it from existence." "With what?" Ra turned to face the general, forgetting her place in her fear. "They destroyed 3,000 ships in seconds. We send 800, they will destroy those just as easily. If we send every ship we have, we simply guarantee our own extinction." The general's scales flushed dark with anger, but he had no response. The numbers were clear. The humans had demonstrated a level of military power that the Empire could not match. Going back for another attack would be suicide. Far from on a small moon orbiting a gas giant, a group of aliens gathered around a communication device. They were a species that had been conquered by the 200 years ago. Once proud and free, they now lived as servants and slaves under Imperial rule. Elder N listened to the recording from Earth for the 3rd time, tears flowing from her large silver eyes. "They did it," she whispered. "Someone finally stood against the Empire. Someone finally won." Around her, younger began to murmur with excitement. For generations, they had believed that resistance was impossible. They were too powerful. Their fleet was too large. No one could challenge them and survive. But now, a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy had proven that belief wrong. "What does this mean for us?" asked a young male named N. "Will the humans help us? Will they free us from the Empire?" N shook her head slowly. "We do not know. We know nothing about these humans except that they have weapons beyond anything we have ever seen. We must wait and watch. But for the first time in 200 years, there is hope." On Earth, the secret was finally revealed. President Amy Richardson addressed the world from the White House, her face calm and serious. Behind her, screens showed images that the public had never seen before. The orbital defense platforms, the moon bases, the hidden weapons that had saved humanity from extinction. "My fellow citizens of Earth," she said, "for 60 years your governments have kept a secret from you. We did this not out of malice but out of necessity. We knew that an invasion was coming. We knew that if we did not prepare, our entire species would be destroyed. She explained everything. The crashed ship in 1947, the dying aliens' warning, the secret alliance between nations that had publicly pretended to be enemies, the decades of hidden research and development that had produced weapons beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Yesterday, an alien fleet of 3,000 warships entered our solar system with the intent to conquer our world. They expected to find a primitive civilization, helpless and weak. The president paused, a hint of pride entering her voice. They were wrong. Our defense systems destroyed the entire fleet in less than 5 seconds. Not a single ship survived. Not a single soldier escaped. Around the world, people watched in stunned silence. Some wept with relief. Some cheered. Some simply stared at their screens, struggling to process what they were hearing. "We are not alone in the universe," the president continued. "But we are not victims either. Humanity has proven that it will not be conquered. It will not be enslaved. It will defend itself against any threat, no matter how powerful." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes steady and determined. "To any civilization watching this broadcast, I say this: Earth wants peace. We have no desire to conquer or dominate, but we will not be attacked. We will not be threatened. From this day forward, humanity takes its place among the stars, not as prey, but as equals." The broadcast ended, but its effects were only beginning. Across the galaxy, oppressed species whispered about the small blue world that had defeated an empire. Aggressive civilizations reconsidered their plans for expansion, and the empire, once feared by all, found itself facing something it had never experienced before: fear. For the first time in their long history, they were afraid, and they had good reason to be. 5 years had passed since the day the fleet died in the skies above Earth. 5 years since humanity revealed itself to the galaxy. 5 years that had changed everything. Captain Danny Harper stood on the bridge of the Horizon, humanity's first true exploration vessel, and watched as the massive station came into view. The Galactic Coalition Station was a wonder of engineering, built in neutral space by the combined efforts of 100 different species. Its design reflected its diverse creators: smooth curves next to sharp angles, organic shapes beside mechanical structures, a beautiful mess of different styles united into one functioning whole. "Docking clearance granted," announced Lieutenant Nick Palmer from his station. Nick had served with Danny since the early days of the defense program. They had grown up together on the moon base, trained together, and now explored the galaxy together. "They're rolling out the welcome, sir. Looks like half the station is waiting to greet us." Danny smiled slightly. When he had first taken command of the Horizon 3 years ago, they had traveled to distant worlds where humans were greeted with fear or suspicion. Many species remembered the destruction of the fleet and wondered if humanity would use its terrible weapons to conquer rather than protect. It had taken time to earn their trust. But earn it they had. "Take us in, Nick. Let's not keep our friends waiting." The Horizon glided smoothly into its docking bay. Through the viewing windows, Danny could see crowds of aliens watching them arrive. They were tall, insect-like with their multifaceted eyes, short, furry with their silver eyes and gentle faces, massive with their rock-like skin and slow, careful movements, and dozens of other species, each unique, each once living under the shadow of conquest. Ambassador Sophie Martinez was already waiting at the airlock when Danny and his crew disembarked. Sophie was in her 50s, with streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of years of difficult negotiations. She had been a diplomat before the revelation, working for the United Nations on minor disputes. Now she represented humanity to the entire galaxy. "Welcome back, Captain," she said, shaking Danny's hand warmly. "The Coalition Council is eager to hear your report on the outer territories." Danny nodded. "We found 3 more civilizations that want to join the coalition, and we discovered evidence of activity near the border. Nothing aggressive, but they're watching." Sophie's expression grew serious. They're always watching, but so far they've kept their distance. She gestured for Danny to follow her. Come, the council is waiting. The Coalition Council chamber was vast, designed to accommodate representatives from every member species. Hundreds of different beings sat in seats arranged in a great circle, each delegation in its own section. At the center, a raised platform held speakers who wished to address the assembly. Sophie climbed to the platform, Danny at her side. She looked out at the gathered representatives, beings from worlds scattered across the galaxy, united by their desire for peace and freedom. Friends, she began, 5 years ago humanity faced extinction. An empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds sent its mightiest fleet to crush us. They expected an easy victory. Instead, they met their end. The chamber was silent, every eye and sensor focused on the human ambassador. We did not seek the power we have. We developed our weapons out of desperation, out of fear. We wanted only to survive. Sophie paused, choosing her next words carefully. But survival alone is not enough. What good is living if others must suffer? What value is safety if it comes at the cost of turning away from those in need? She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had once been slaves, species that had lived in terror for centuries. Earth offers this promise to every world in this coalition. No species that seeks peace will ever stand alone again. We are not your rulers. We are not your masters. We are your neighbors, and we will stand beside you against any who threaten your freedom. The chamber erupted in cheers and sounds of approval from 100 different species. Danny watched as beings who had known only fear and oppression for generations expressed hope for the first time. Later, as Danny walked through the station, he found himself in a quiet observation deck overlooking the stars. The galaxy stretched out before him, billions of points of light representing billions of worlds. Somewhere out there, the Empire still lurked, weakened but not destroyed. Other aggressive powers were surely watching, calculating, wondering if they could succeed where they had failed. Nick Palmer found him there, staring out at the cosmos. Heavy thoughts, Captain. Danny glanced at his old friend. Just thinking about how much has changed. 5 years ago, we were hiding on a moon base, preparing for an invasion we weren't sure we could survive. Now we're out here, building alliances with alien species, traveling to the edge of the galaxy. And wondering if it'll last. Yeah, Danny turned back to the window. Peace is fragile. It only takes one aggressive power to shatter it. We showed the galaxy that humanity can't be conquered, but that doesn't mean they'll stop trying to conquer others. Nick stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment. Then we make sure they know we're watching. We keep building the coalition. We keep sharing our technology with the ones who want peace. And if someone decides to start trouble, he shrugged, then they'll learn the same lesson they did. Danny nodded slowly. It wasn't a perfect answer. There were no perfect answers, but it was enough for now. On Earth, in a small house in Montana, 92-year-old General Jack sat on his front porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. His body had grown frail with age, but his mind was still sharp. He remembered every moment of the long journey that had brought humanity to this point. His granddaughter, 12-year-old, ran up to him with a tablet in her hands. Her face was bright with excitement. "Grandpa, look, Uncle Danny is on the news. They're showing him at the coalition station." Jack took the tablet and watched the footage of Danny standing beside Ambassador Sophie, addressing the alien delegates. He thought about the dying alien in the desert, the warning that had started everything. He thought about the decades of secret work, the sacrifices made by so many who would never receive recognition. Grandpa sat down beside him. "What you did, building all those weapons and keeping the secret, it saved everyone, right?" Jack pulled his granddaughter close. "A lot of people worked very hard for a very long time to make sure we would survive. I was just one of them. But we did it, we survived. We did more than survive, sweetheart. Jack looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. We changed the galaxy. We gave people hope. Followed his gaze upward, her young eyes full of wonder. Do you think there will always be bad aliens out there who want to hurt us? Jack was quiet for a moment. There will always be those who want to take from others. That's true everywhere, I think, on any planet. But there will also always be those who want to protect, those who believe in peace and freedom. And as long as there are people like that, the darkness can never win. Leaned against her grandfather, content. Above them, the stars shone bright against the darkness of space, each one a reminder that humanity was no longer alone. And among those stars, a new order was being born, one where the strong protected the weak, and hope lit the way forward. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but humanity faced it unafraid. They had been tested by fire and proven themselves worthy. Whatever came next, they would meet it together. And the galaxy would never underestimate them again.